that's gonna weigh a lot.
That's got
Yeah, that's
even
pretty
this.
gorgeous down
That old museum was great, the art museum.
I love
When
it.
they had Van Gogh, I went there
Did you get
years
to
ago,
visit it?
yeah.
Yeah.
there. The art museum's good, the city museum's good, those are all, I mean, you can spend a day down there just walking around, it's really cool.
The history museum is really good too.
Is it?
They had a big Cardinals thing when I was down there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they had some of the stage chairs. Very good.
Neat.
Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you everyone for coming and watching on TV. I have a very short report. Just a reminder that the city office hours, August 1st, is changing where they are going to be closing at 4:30. The only other thing that I really have is, several months back, we kept talking about the BAI report, and we finally got that. And the BA report analyzing the electric cash reserves, it shows the reserves are underfunded, and we were afraid of that. So we're going to be working with the Utility Advisory Board on the best way to implement the recommendations. So really, there's no more to report on that at this time. So that's all I have. City Administrator, please.
Yes. Last week I attended the Murma conference at the lake. Lots of information on COVID, cybersecurity, workers' comp claims, and police procedures. It was a good conference. And I'll give a little update on the CETOL pressure issue. As I said in my email to all of you, the board and the mayor, the folks that live on Epley, Fricky, and CETOL Ridge have low water pressure because of the elevation of their homes. The residents are concerned not only with their household water pressure, but also with fire protection. Last Monday, I met with the city engineering firm and a pump specialist. The most cost-effective way to alleviate the problem is with a booster pump station. Currently, we're working with the engineer to supply water usage data along with the pressure gradients for the entire CETOL development. As soon as those numbers are tabulated, they will be given to a pump specialist to determine the style and size of the pump needed to maintain adequate pressure for CETOL Ridge and those along Epley-Fricky Drive. As far as fire protection, I believe that the residents would like to know that there is a protocol or procedure for fighting a fire along Epley-Fricky and CETOL Ridge. I have spoken to Mayor Cox, who has been a firefighter for many years, and he assured me that the local volunteer fire department has a procedure for drawing water from the lake.
I can expand on that. We can do what they call drafting out of the lake and do relay pumping, or we are equipped with what we call porta tanks. If we have a fire out in a rural area, we take porta tanks, we call mutual aid from other departments that have tankers, and the tankers continually fill the porta tank, so there's a constant flow of water. And so the water supply is really not an issue. It would be there.
That's all I have, sir.
All right. Dr. Rotherman.
Good evening. I apologize for being late. We were at the board meeting.
Oh, you're fine. You're next.
Then I guess I was right on time.
You want to come up to the podium?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I thank you for inviting me to come this evening. Just for a brief bit of background, obviously we've all been dealing with COVID and COVID-related problems for quite some time. And I guess it's been about 2 weeks ago on Thursday, we had a meeting with the health department, the Gaston County Health Department. And at that time, myself as well as some of the members of our hospital, the rest of our hospital medical staff, had noticed some trends that concerned us. And we shared those in the course of that meeting with the possibility of a discussion of whether or not it might make sense for the health department to consider a countywide mandate for mask use. During the course of that meeting, it was made clear that while the health department had the authority to do that, they were not interested in proceeding without the support of the cities and the county government. And so when asked for direction about who I should share our concerns with, we were directed to share our concerns with the cities of Owensville, the city of Hermann, and with the, subsequently I had an opportunity to speak briefly with the Chamber of Commerce here in Hermann. So what prompted our concern was, as many of you have been aware, I've been doing the testing for our county basically with the COVID testing. So as you were out there helping put out the fire, we were down at HMA, which was certainly a challenge, and luckily we were able to salvage the PPE from that event. We started over there, and pretty routinely we were doing 30 or 50 tests week in, week out, and in an average week we were getting either 0 or 1 positive. And that stayed pretty consistent all the way through March, March and April and May, and even into June. When we hit July, my number of tests jumped to over 100, well over 100. The week of July, the first week of July, I did 166 tests. The second week I did 154, and then last week 117, which was a substantial increase from only needing to test about 30 or 40 or 50 people. We also had a substantial increase. Instead of 1 or 2 positives, we had 12, 11, and then last week, the current update is 4 positives. So that was a big jump in the number of people, not just that I'm testing, but also that tested positive. We only have 1 testing site here in Hermann. Those people were all here. They are not all residents of Gasconade County. Some are residents of Warren County. Some are residents of Montgomery County. Some had traveled, but had seen one of our providers, either from St. Charles or some other place. But they were all here, members of our community, or were in our community. So that was something different, and it prompted me to be worried, and especially in light of many of the surrounding states, Kansas, Arkansas, Kentucky, although I think they've waffled a little bit, Illinois, going with statewide mandates, and several cities, particularly St. Louis and St. Louis County, who obviously send a lot of folks here to travel on the weekends, where those folks are all under mask mandates for the locale where they're at. So again, my understanding in the discussions that I've had with other members of the county commission and some of the folks who've, I think, had the opportunity to speak with some of you is that Owensville was quite clear that they were not interested in a city mandate, and that and I believe Hermann is in sort of a similar situation, that we're not going to proceed with anything like that. So I did want to pass on my concerns that we are seeing more people who are sick, more people who are worried about being sick, and I think, you know, from word of mouth, we've seen some of the areas that's touched in our community.
And out of those you've tested, there's only, what, 4 positive now, or 5? In the county, I'm talking. The rest of them all recovered, correct?
So when you look at the Gasconade County, that's measuring the people who live here. They don't include anybody who would live in Rhineland and work here, or live in Warren County and come here to do their shopping, or it wouldn't include anybody who lives in Washington and comes here.
So your stats are different than Gasconade County?
Correct. Mine measure a different thing, and there are a lot of people who are in the Gasconade County numbers, but they went to Mercy, Washington, tested positive, and that's how they found out. So I'm measuring different things, and so yeah, we can't add them together either which way to get to sort of a whole number. But I do think that if we exclusively look at where a person lives, that doesn't define the community that they belong to. Because lots of us belong to different communities, right? There's the places we work, the places we socialize, and as well as the places we live. So that was all I was going to do, is express my concern.
Well, we appreciate you coming. If you all have any discussion?
I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
I'm not sure this will be the venue tonight to do that, but I would like to, at some point, run some questions past you. One, for instance, is there a certified COVID-19 test?
Oh.
The test you're running now,
Sure.
Is it specific for COVID-19, or is it the typical PCR test that picks up anything and everything? That's the reason they have so many false positives. What type of test are you?
Sure. So okay. So the PCR looks for a fragment of the RNA that's in COVID.
Right.
I have not seen false positives with that test, except in one specific situation. And the specific situation where that is having false positives is for you and me to say a person is positive means they're dangerous. And the point is they could spread the disease. And what we can see is a person who tests positive by PCR, they have the COVID virus in their nasal pharynx, but they've recovered from it. They've developed antibodies, their body's fought it off, but there still can be residual RNA for weeks or months that you can detect in their nasal passages. That was updated in the CDC's guidance last Wednesday to no longer use a repeat test to negative to be a return to work criteria for most businesses, including healthcare settings. So because they're recognizing that it's not that it's detecting different DNA, it's still COVID DNA. The problem is it's fragments of DNA that aren't viable organisms.
But not necessarily COVID-19. It could be COVID, coronavirus, common cold, that picks that all up and things of that sort.
I do not believe so. I have not seen any data to suggest cross-reactivity with it. What I can tell you, and we do about, I'd say, if you look at the ratio of the tests that I personally collect, we do about 5 or 10% PCR that's sent off either to the state lab or Quest. About what I'm doing nowadays is 90% antigen testing. And what that tests for is a very specific protein on the outside of the intact viral capsule. It is like the PCR testing, it is very specific, so a positive test is a positive. My test does have a higher false negative rate than PCR does. In other words, a person has to have a higher viral load than the PCR threshold is, and there are some places where that can be useful, testing, clearing somebody early to say that they are negative. But we recognize limitations of that, and in cases where we have a very high concern, we send a secondary test off to PCR. But I'd be interested, what led you to believe that the PCR was not specific?
The inventor, Carrie Mullis, said that test she invented cannot detect infectious diseases. That's a quote from her. Yes, that's the test that every doctor, every testing site is using.
Right.
But the inventor, I'm just real skeptical about the testing, the mask. Has there been a test to verify whether or not that mask you're wearing is appropriate and will actually work against the COVID-19?
What I would say is the bulk of current science says that the mask I wear when I'm doing the COVID testing, which is an N100 mask.
Right.
So I use a dual chamber, one-way valve mask that you would use, say, in a paint center.
Right.
So I use that.
That one is.
When
That
I'm doing
one's
testing.
not.
So that one probably offers about a 95% reduction in transmission. Nothing's going to be 100%, but it's about 95. If you do a surgical mask, which is one of those, we're looking at
44.
I'm sorry?
44%.
About 85 is the current science that I've seen across lots of studies and general published. And in this, we're probably looking at, if both people are in masks, probably about a 50% reduction. If only one of the two parties is, it's substantially less. But, what I can say is, I know there are a lot of people out there who, there's been guidance in different directions. This is a rapidly evolving scientific situation. I read as many of the primary articles as I can to look at the individual science of it. One of the things that, at the onset of this, knowing 6 days a week I would be getting coughed and sneezed on by people with active disease, I developed a sense that there was probably an inevitability that sooner or later I would catch it, regardless of my best efforts at infectious disease.
Do you take hydrochloroquine?
Absolutely not. I would say that the scientists have come pretty hard on that not being an effective preventive method.
There are a lot of doctors that could come in here that would disagree with that, as far as the effectiveness, as far as the ability to ward that off. So.
But what I would say changed my outlook on it, because again, I'm pretty young, I'm pretty healthy, I didn't figure I would likely have one of the more complicated courses, was some of the concerning studies that we have seen in people who are having lingering and long-term effects, even sometimes affecting the young. The effects we're seeing on hearts and kidneys, and the effects we're seeing on brains, where people are describing prolonged mental fog and fugue, and the increased risk of strokes that we're seeing with this.
But those same things are coming from people who are wearing the mask, the long-term reaction and the long-term effect of people that are wearing cloth masks like that, with decrease in oxygen, increase in carbon dioxide. So, I mean, when you start looking at all these science and all the effects, it's just real confusing. You're right, so many different.
I certainly, for a non-scientist, trying to tease through the different screaming voices can be quite a challenge. What I will say is, through my medical career, one of the things I've always done is assisted in surgery. I've spent 8 or 12 or 14 hours wearing surgical masks. I have not seen long-term cognitive effects in most of our surgeons. One of the people who do this is, of course, of their regular job, day in, day out. And I think we would see those if some of the alarmist concerns that masks could cause were to be borne out. But all I can share is what I'm seeing and what I'm reading and what the medical references that I'm seeing are suggesting.
I appreciate your sincerity. I appreciate you being here and answering those questions.
Sure. It's
A lot of people want to
yes,
work.
sir.
Throughout this course of the virus, is there something that the people in the Hermann area are doing differently than our neighboring? Because from the street rumors, more of the known cases came from the southern part of the county versus the northern part.
I mean, we had an outbreak in the southern part of our community. We've had some that have, Montgomery County has been affected by a fair number of cases as well. My gut is we've gotten lucky, and we've been dodging the bullet. I think the hospital here and the clinics here have been really, really meticulous in not letting people in. We've had a 100% mask policy for visitors, patients. We shut down visitors for a long time. The nursing home here has been extremely, deliberate in trying to protect their communities, and so far this is one of the few nursing homes that has not been affected across our state, because they've been just very, very strict in their infectious control and trying to protect that population. That being said, I haven't seen good, if we look at the available things, the guidance says wear masks, social distance. I haven't seen our community by and large embrace those measures. So, I don't think otherwise we're substantially different. I think it's mostly been good luck or blessing, depending upon your background. And I hate to be in a situation where that's what we're hoping for. I think sometimes, luck favors those who make their own.
You don't think it's all blind?
I don't think so, but,
That's good for your stomach, sir.
well, my grandmother, who grew up in Italy, just outside of Vatican City, and believes that wine should be given to babies not until they're at least 3 or 4 days old. You hold off for a little while. She would probably say that that's the reason we haven't.
All right.
She recently visited us, unfortunately, after an accident.
Anybody else have anything?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, we sure appreciate it. Citizens' comments, Greg, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I'll be real short. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Dr. Rothermich was telling. We communicate quite a bit, a lot of times on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day. We fully understand the situation he's in. He's doing the testing, and we're very lucky to have Dr. Rothermich on our staff here at this hospital, because he does an awesome job in supporting the public health. Just talking about our statistics today, I think you see everybody kind of looks at our daily dashboard. It's not daily all the time, but today we had 23 total cases. 5 of them are still active, and then they've tested approximately 1,384 citizens of our county. We look a lot at the statistics and the numbers. Sometimes, and I caught myself doing that also, we look at the numbers and we forget about the personal side of it. Recently I started assisting our nurses and communicating with the patients, the positive cases, and communicating with their family members, their friends, some of the people, and that really kind of hit me that, it's real important that we, the numbers are real important that we follow statistics, so we know if we're getting better or worse or whatever. But we also want to make sure we keep in mind the personal side of things, the personal stories. People that aren't necessarily the healthiest folks can come down with it. And when they do come down with it, it's extremely hard on them. So anything that we can do, such as wearing masks, social distancing, those kinds of issues can always help out. Maybe it only helps out 10%. What's 10% of our total population of our county? About 150 people, and that's a pretty big jump, pretty big number. We've got several people hospitalized. We only have 23 total positive cases. If we have 2 or 3 people in the hospital, what kind of percentage is that? That's close to 10%. That's a pretty high percentage. But anyhow, and I'm not picking on anybody. I just want to try and do everything we can to promote different mitigation procedures, such as the social distancing, face mask usages. Maybe ask Tammy, see if there's something we can do to a little bit better to remind visitors as they come in to our county to keep that in mind as they're around strangers, as they're around friends and family that maybe they haven't seen for a while, but maybe they should put a mask on here. Would highly recommend that. Anyhow, that's about all I have.
So it maybe be a question for the doctor, but yes, I look at those charts and I appreciate, and Bruce is good about putting it out. It seems like when we do have some cases, but it seems like our recovery time is shortening. It seems like we're getting faster. Is there medications or treatments, or are we catching it early enough before it expands throughout the body to increase the recovery, or?
What I would say on that is that every individual person's course with COVID is like it can be with many other ailments. Some people get hit hard, whether they're young or old, and some people get hit much milder. And our sample size is so small, 20 people. I mean, that's what we've been blessed by. It's what we have. That we're going to I don't think we can put a pattern on it. I mean, I think COVID is the same disease here that it is on either of the coasts or in other parts of the world. I think our people are fundamentally similar. We're not different that much than the rest of the people of the world. What we've got is we are a more spread out community, which slows down spread in a given area. We do less interactions than many people do in busy urban areas, and that's helped us some, and we've gotten lucky. But I will tell you that I've personally lost 12 of my patients so far. Not here. I do another job where I work hospice. Those are people with severe medical conditions. Those were people in very poor health, but they did die faster than we expected after they got sick with this in some of those nursing homes in the St. Louis area. I have people that I know and work closely to, associates of mine who are healthy, that are 2 weeks into their course and not feeling any better yet. But I've also seen other people who had lots of medical complications that I expected that had a very poor prognosis, and 4 or 5 days later they were feeling fine. I can't predict that, but as far as our treatments go, the things that the scientific literature is clearly showing a benefit for is for really, really sick people, ICU ventilated patients. We do believe that dexamethasone improves the outcome. And remdesivir may help as well in those very, very advanced diseases, but for things where people are convalescing at home, not yet in the hospital, nothing that we have seen has consistently proven a better outcome or gotten people better. I have seen case reports, I've heard physicians that swear this works or that works, but each time we've tried to put those into prospective, randomized studies, we've not seen it wash out.
Another thing that kind of adds to that is the reporting time. Sometimes we don't, by the time we find out about it, we get the reports posted, they may have already been through 4, 5, 6 days of having that virus and viral infection. So if we only quarantine them for 14 days, then it'll seem like they came off quicker, but they're actually still going through that same.
But 14 is still the minimum
Right.
quarantine time.
It looks good. We've got some, but that's why I was wondering, it seems like they're recovering, so is there a secret out there
Yeah,
that?
and
I wish, I really do.
But then 99% of the people who have COVID, they do recover. So Is that figure, is that percentage
That's,
for
that's.
99%?
I would say that that is fairly close, and again, no, I mean, we're right now saying that it's within a percentage or a half percentage of that. So I would say that's a reasonable number to say that but I also think, and I did point out, that one of the things we'll have to ask is what is intact survival? So survival is important, but we also want people to survive, to be able to go back to do the things they used to do. For example, if you look at ICU data, the number of people who survive cardiopulmonary resuscitation is a given number. But if you were an active member of your community, if you went out hiking and golfing, and after your CPR, the next 5 years of your life are nothing but being in the nursing home and have to be hand-fed by somebody else, I'm not sure we could all agree that that is survival. Yes, you are alive, but intact survival, being able to go back and do what you want. And that number we don't know yet for COVID. How many people are going to be, and I think if you read the national news, you'll see there's been an increasing number of support reports over the last couple of weeks and the last couple of days of concerning, lingering, long-term effects that recover, people who have appeared to recover aren't returning to their baseline status.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to ordinances.
All right. Do you have any more citizens?
No, I only had the one. That was all I had.
Okay, so the first bill on the agenda is 2020-15. That was to address address numbers that we've talked about before, and we talked about modifying that, and it was modified so much, my recommendation was to just introduce it as a new bill and let this one die, unless somebody wants to make a motion to have it second read or first read. All right, I don't hear any, so we'll go ahead then with bill number 2020-20, an ordinance to amend section 500.020C of the Hermann Municipal Code regarding building address numbers.
Everybody have a chance to read that?
Well, I'm not reading something in here I thought we discussed, and maybe I'm just looking at it wrong, but we discussed that people that already have numbers that are plainly visible within the guidelines here, but are not 4 inches tall, to keep those until it's time to replace them, and then replace them with 4-inch numbers. And does this say that?
Yes.
Okay.
If you currently have a number that's unobstructed and big enough to be easily viewed from the street, and within 50 feet of the curb, well, then you're okay. The one thing I added here is that your number will be deemed of sufficient size if it's at least 4 inches in height.
If they are at least, okay.
Yeah. So if somebody is on the fence or they question it, if they go out and buy 4-inch numbers, well, then they'll be good. But somebody who, like I think was your intent, if you've got somebody who's got 3.5-inch tall numbers, but they're backlit and really nice and you can see them well, we didn't want them to go out and buy 50-cent plastic numbers to replace that with, so.
The idea is, I excite people, the idea is to get the houses numbered. So, okay, that's all I was saying.
I had a comment in that same section, number 3, section C, number 3, within 50 feet of the curb of the street address. We have several buildings that sit further than 50 feet off of the curb. So in that's the case, do they have to come in 5 foot and put a post up in their yard in order to put numbers up? If, say, my house is 52 feet from the curb line, I'm actually in violation of the ordinance. So do I have to come in 2 feet and put a post up to put my number on?
I think the whole point, if it was eligible from the roadway, then they were exempt from doing it, the 50 feet.
The 50 foot from the curb was, that's just been brought over from the old ordinance.
Yeah.
So we could strike that if you think it's.
Well, the old ordinance said in there, if in our city office would be one of them, it says more than 100 feet from the street. In that case, they have to have within 50 foot of the curb, which they do at the section of, was 18th Street and Jefferson.
Yeah, the 50 feet from the curb is going to be troublesome. As long as it's legible, clearly legible from the street, that's all we should.
Well, if you look at the BP fuel station,
Yeah.
it's more than 50 feet off of the curb line. Hermann Fuel Mart would be more than 50 feet away from the curb line. So that 50 foot threw me a curveball.
But we could just strike number 3 and change number 2 slightly to say of sufficient size and close enough to the curb to be easily viewed from the street of address. Or I mean, I guess we don't have to say anything about the curb, we just say of sufficient size to be easily viewed from the street. Mayor's nodding his head, so.
I think that would be the way to do it.
Some of the streets may not have a curb.
Good point, yeah. Well, in a couple of years, they should all have.
Well, I'm just saying.
Okay.
There's a couple other things I know was in the old ordinance that we don't have the new one. And one of them, I kind of liked in there, where it said, which shall be located either near a building's main entrance or above a garage or on a surface that is easily visible from the street or address. That would give us an idea where that number would be.
Well, I think that we got it covered I think the most important words in this are to be easily viewed from the street of address. And so that's why we were okay with nixing the 50-foot.
Because if you drive around, you will find some people don't really have it on their building, they'll have it on the mailbox on the porch. So you're gonna make them change that, put it on the building? I mean, it's still, it's still.
As long as it's easily viewed from the street.
Easily viewed.
So that's what I'm saying, you know, so
Yeah.
that,
I can deal with that. And then the other thing I'd seen in here, I think we should mention that it should be in contrasting colors. So if you have a white house, do you put white numbers up? Or if you have a dark gray colored house and you put black numbers on it, so the numbers aren't easily visible from the street.
but we're still covered because it says visible from the street.
Easily viewed. Easily viewed from the street of address. That means if they put white numbers on a white house, it ain't easily viewed. I mean, I had to replace mine because they were painted over. I mean, they were black or brass at one time and they got painted over white. They're black now. I mean, the easily viewed, I'd say, is the key word to that. As I said, the idea isn't to cite people, the idea is to get these houses numbered. And I think what's written here, I believe, will do that.
And you could say, again, you could say of sufficient size, comma, proximity to the street and color such that it is easily viewed from the street.
Of course, the easily view will be the interpretation of the, I guess, the complainant that says so-and-so's house does not have proper numbers.
Right. And if that person is issued a notice and they don't do anything about it, that complainer, who probably would be our ordinance enforcement officer, would have to show up in municipal court and be sworn in and say that he was driving by and slowly maybe and couldn't determine the number when they were doing it.
Like the things that popped up in my head was the BP station, Hermann Fuel Mart, the old high school building. Even if they come out 50 foot, you wouldn't be able to see the numbers because it sits high enough up off the street level right across from Fairbur's house. But that's where that 50 foot kind of puzzled me. And
The 50 foot isn't necessary as long as the number
cut
is
that out.
easily viewed from the street. I already marked it out, actually.
But as long as that's known there that easily viewed from the street, that takes care of being a contrasted color. Okay.
Any other discussion?
You want to make the motion? It's yours.
I'll make motion ordinance 2020-20 be first read,
And I will second,
With the amendment.
with the amended, yeah.
which is to remove the within 50 foot of the curb.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed? Okay, that's done with ordinances. We move to old business. I have old business.
I got nothing.
We need to bring up, the issue with, Worst House, I guess.
Okay.
So is that under old business? That would be under old business?
Yes,
Oh,
we discussed it at the last meeting,
Okay.
and,
Anybody that wasn't here, the owner of the Worst House, Mike Sloan, approached us with a deal with his business. He, during the COVID shutdowns and lack of customers, he tried something to bring in customers. It worked. Now, I'd like to point out, Mike came to us. He stood right up here and said, I tried this. It probably doesn't go by our city ordinances. He said, but it worked, and I'd like to know if there's anything I can do to keep doing this. Since then, we've been working on it. We've been looking, we had to decide, first off, if what he was doing was illegal. It turns out that the grill, as it sits at the moment, is sitting on city right-of-way, city property, and that is against our city ordinance. Mark has looked at it, I've looked at it. Actually, today, I went out and talked to Mike. There is a way to arrange it so that that smoker is completely sitting on Worst House property.
with the, thing you got from the, surveyor, is there enough room to change that to make that work?
Yes, there is.
Is that some kind of magic
Because he's only got,
Mike's got 2.5 foot.
No, actually, he's got about 3.5 feet. Actually, it's a little more than that. From the front of the building out is 2.5 feet. The difference is, and I have never noticed it, many times as I've been in that building, I've never paid any attention. Have you noticed some great big arched windows he's got on the front of that building? They aren't windows, they're alcoves. That inset to those windows goes all the way to the ground. And that window is wide enough that that holds unit. Not, you guys probably measured the trailer.
I measured the trailer.
Yeah,
and the
well,
smoker.
the smoker itself, set on a stand, the footprint will sit completely on Worst House property.
Does it now? Does it now?
No, it does not now. I mean, he
What
just
meeting
pulled it
did
in
he
there
come
to
and
try.
tell us this? Because I don't remember. What meeting did he come and talk about this?
Where was he?
My first 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
you weren't here.
Okay,
That would explain it.
so that was
Yeah.
the 27th.
No, where it's sitting now is right, obviously, against our ordinances. But I was kind of curious, because Jim had put some figures out, and I didn't think that was right. When I got down there, it became obvious. You've got a smoker sitting on a trailer. Well, that trailer quadruples the size of what he's trying to do. And I asked Mike, I said, will I come off that trailer? He said, yeah. So I grabbed a tape measure. And it wasn't until I walked around the front of that trailer that I realized that those arched windows are actually alcoves. They sit back in this far.
Are
Now,
they
you add
glass?
that to the 2.5 feet, that smoker will fit there,
Are
and
they
it will sit
glass?
entirely on his property.
Are they
Well,
glass windows? I mean, will they heat?
Do what?
Do anything to that glass?
You can walk up to that smoker when it's running full tilt and put your hand on the side of it and hold it there. There's no heat coming off
And what does the health department say?
That's not my issue. My issue was to find out if it would sit entirely on his property. And that's the point where our city ordinances take care of. Now, Mike is going to be coming before Landmarks Commission to modify the front of that building. Put an awning over it, there will be a stack off of the smoker going up out through the top to move the smoke away from any of the people around. I think there was he going to screen that in on that end, I believe. I haven't actually seen the blueprints yet, but he has not come to the Landmarks Commission with it yet. There was a holdup on this to find out if it was possible to do this totally on his property. And from what we looked at today, he was going to talk to some people about making a stand for it and everything. It's now the ball's back in Mike's court to make sure that it will actually sit there and fit. But by the tape measure, it will.
but I think the issue today is he's in violation of the ordinance.
He is.
He's in also violation of the Gasconade County Health Department.
Yeah, the way it's sitting.
Because the health department said the only way that only during festival events, and Greg left, but he said during a festival event, they do make some modifications. One is the hot and cold water and sink is not required, which is required by the Department of Health, Senior Services. And i.e., the Masons, when they do they're kind of exempt from it because it's a festival event. So Mike would have to have that out there. It has to be screened in, and if it's on city property, he can't do that. But Greg told me Friday on the 24th that he had met with Mike on the 23rd and advised that it would have to be screened in and roofed.
What about underneath it, the ashes and
And
the
then
grease?
underneath
There's
it,
no ashes for
I asked Greg about this because I went down there, yes I did, and I saw you drove by. I was measuring the 12-foot right away from the edge of the curb. There was a bucket, plastic bucket, that had grease drippings in it, half full. And Greg said that that would have to be sealed with a tube coming down to it. And then there's a bucket of ashes sitting right beside the grease. And at 8 o'clock at night, that smoker was still close to 200 degrees, which was unmanned, nobody was around, smoke was still coming out of the smoke. And the hours of the operation for the outdoor seating is it's only open during the hours of operation of the business. That's been approved. Mike has made changes to the approval diagram that has been moved in.
Okay.
So total seating is different, the tables are different. He's changed it all. He's never updated with approval from the P&Z or the board. He's increased the seating from where it was, and you're adding the measurement, counting the trailer is 9 feet, approximately 9 feet long. So he's taken 9 feet away, but he's added larger tables and more chairs, which common sense says that should have probably decreased instead of remaining the same or adding.
So does he go to planning and zoning or landmarks?
Well, for the outdoor seating, I think he has to go through P&Z.
For the landmark.
Well, landmarks is for the modification.
But none of that really answers the complaint that the neighbor has.
Yeah,
And I
I'm just
think
gonna
we
say-
need to be just as concerned about her complaint as we are Mike's request. You know,
Well, and I agree with you, but the deal was, is it possible to make that legal? And according to our legal counsel, the only way it would even be acceptable as legal is if that smoker grill, whatever you want to call it, sat on his property.
The whole
And it
thing
is-
screened in and everything? or
That's not, it's just that the deal is you can't cook on a city sidewalk. If it's on his property, it's not on the city sidewalk. Now, everything else will extrapolate out from that point. The screen in, the health department has their own regulations and stuff. The only thing I was concerned about, was it actually possible to get that on just his own property? And that is possible. Now, you've got the ashes, you can't have those ashes inside of, you clean that out, that's fine, but those ashes gotta go someplace else. The grease bucket, like Jim said, it's gotta be sealed. The stack will have to go out so the smoke is redirected away from the people and neighbors and everything else. There again, it's totally possible to do, but that wasn't, if you couldn't get that grill on just his property, none of that really made any difference. But that part is at least doable.
But the bottom line is, he's got to wait till a planning and zoning meeting.
That's
Or
correct.
landmarks, or either one or both. That's going to be a month and a half. I think the situation is, he's breaking an ordinance now that,
What do you say, Dave?
I agree with Dave's analysis somewhat because he was just repeating what I was saying in a couple of emails. To be clear, the ordinance that we're talking about says that you can't have a cooking or fire apparatus on the public sidewalk. Sidewalk means right-of-way. Right-of-way is what the surveyor found comes within 2.5 to 3.5 feet of his building. What do you do if he has something of his, be it the cooker or the screen or whatever, on city property? Well, it's our property, we can tell him tomorrow to get it off of our property, or we will get it off of our property for him. The other thing is, with respect to the cooking on the sidewalk, if we say, well, okay, we're going to permit him to have this cooker on city sidewalk, somebody could say, well, but he's still cooking on the sidewalk, which is prohibited by that ordinance. It would be legal for the Board of Aldermen to say that for the time being, we are going to relax or not enforce the cooking on the sidewalk ordinance, pass a motion or a resolution to that effect, but it would have to apply to everybody, not just mine. I mean, if that's zone C2 highway commercial, as I've said here dozens of times, what you do for one, you have to do for all. And so if you were going to relax the enforcement of that can't cook on the sidewalk ordinance, you'd have to do it with a broad brush. So, in terms of what is legal for the city to do, I think the city has some options. It's really up to you guys how you want to handle it.
Could Mike move that around to the back? And
Oh, yeah, it's on a trailer with wheels, you can hook to it, move it in place.
And that would give him extra seating, and that's what he seemed to be concerned about when he came here, was because of COVID, he had to, his seating, he had to expand that. And so that's why he wanted the outside seating. He moved that cooker. That's going to give him much more seating in that area.
The space is the same.
Right,
And he's extended his seating already.
Already, right. And,
With the cooker being in there.
and as far as the smell and drawing people in, I did a test. You can go around to the back and still smell it up front, and it wants to draw you there. So,
And I can't picture what Dave said here, that it would fit in the window. He would basically have to take one of those arched windows.
No, there's.
Because I don't have the measurements. I measured the cooker, and that cooker is, counting the trailer, because that's sitting on the sidewalk, it's close to 8 foot wide.
Yeah, but the cooker comes off the trailer.
You take that off, that cooker's still gonna be, I'm guesstimating here, probably a good 3 to 4 foot wide.
I think it's
Yeah, if he's got
What did you?
42, around 42, 44 inches wide.
Okay.
44 inches wide, you said?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
So he's only got 2.5 foot.
No, the window goes in another 1.5 foot.
Okay, he's got 3 foot. And that
3 foot
cooker,
is 36 inches.
yeah, he's gotta put that, he's gotta get that inside the building.
No, it has to be past that line on the sidewalk.
What, the 2.5 foot?
But the window goes in further than that. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The window is recessed. I didn't realize it either, Jim. You'll have to go look.
Yeah.
But the window's recessed. The footprint of that will sit totally on his property. But for right now, we have to solve the problem of,
The problem now is I think we need to cease and desist the use of the cooker being placed upon city right-of-way and removed from city right-of-way. And failure to do so, we may have to come back and revoke his outdoor seating. If not, then let's take that ordinance and tear it up and throw it in the trash.
Well, we need to also respect that there are other people that are involved in this.
Then we
too.
got
People that are
potential
upset
lawsuit
about it.
coming, and Dave can probably chime in there, but my understanding is if there is a lawsuit that comes about due to excessive smoke or health condition, and we as a city have an ordinance that would prohibit that, but we allow it to continue, then the city may also be named in that lawsuit. Is that potential?
well, the situation as it exists is not telling. I mean, that's, if I thought it wasn't, wouldn't have been down there with a tape measure trying to figure out if there was another way to do it. I mean, I think he understands it, at least for now. He's going to have to move it until he can find a way to comply with city ordinances in a different deal.
and then come back and do it in a proper manner.
Yes, do it in the proper manner.
I think that's the answer right there.
I do too.
Chris?
Do you want to
Make it, have to see, I'm still blinded as far as that would work in that window, because that window is flush with his property on
So it is.
it. Well, the brick that leads up to the window, and you take that
Well,
window.
the windows are recessed inside. Like I said, I didn't realize it either, Jim, till I went.
Well, that's for him to figure out.
Yeah,
that's
If you
for
guys
him.
want to go ahead and let's move on, if you want to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we ask the worst house, I guess, to cease and desist, is that what I would say? Or move the cooker
Tell the
until,
first house to move the cooker off of our property.
until after he's went through all the proper channels and got approval.
I think you can leave it as simple as move your cooker off our
Right.
property. Must comply, period.
Because it cannot go back to the condition it's in right now.
Right,
There you go.
okay,
Have
I
a
make
motion?
that motion.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Rick, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, so carried. Okay, is there any other old business?
I have a question. Am I doing the notifying by letter, or how are we notifying?
When is the code enforcement officer working next? Is he working tomorrow by chance?
He was here today.
So we should have, okay,
It should be by letter, and I would think it should be hand-delivered
or box it, box it.
to him or somebody else who's there. And if nobody's there, duct tape to the door.
Is that to happen?
And order not to take it to the door.
You know, and we need to ensure that he got notice. Right.
And that's immediately upon receipt?
Yeah.
You want a registered letter, or you want to hand deliver?
I'd say handle
No,
it.
I think just hand it.
Mine's pretty easy to find.
And deliver and make notations of to whom you give it and date and time for documentation.
Okay. No other old business? Anybody have any new business? Moving right along, motions, and motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So carried.
I move we pay the bill.
I didn't say that.
Okay, come on.
Do I have a motion to pay the bills, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So carried. Okay, item C, hire light duty mechanic. We had a vacancy in the mechanic's position in the city, and there's a recommendation that we hire Frank Bildine, submitted by Todd, the street foreman, Todd Lindsay.
I make a motion to approve the hiring of Frank Bildine.
Motion approved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Rick, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Picnic liquor license, St. George Parish fundraising dinner, school gymnasium, 128 West 4th Street, September 26, 2020.
Move to approve.
I'll
Motion
second.
approved in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Park Board, appoint Gary Liebman and Tim Kramer to the Park Board. This will, the good thing about this will bring us up to a full Park Board, which we haven't had for a long time.
I move to approve.
Motion approved, second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
So carried. Special event application, Austin T. Beck, private rental of the amphitheater, August 1st, 2020.
Yeah. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a secret.
Well, then why isn't it an open meeting, you know? Move to approve.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Special event application, Park Pride, Owens Dinosaur Park dedication and closure of portion of West 9th Street at the Sand Park on 9th Street, August 1st, 2020.
I move to approve.
Motion made, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carried.
Can I just
I said-
clarify that?
I want to say something too, so you go first.
Okay, there are no secrets in public meetings, and we were laughing because that was for a wedding proposal. Somebody's renting it for a wedding proposal.
I would just like to say that this park, that Park Pride is doing, the dinosaur park, is in honor of Owen Steiner. And I think it would be wonderful if everybody came and showed their support and had a popsicle and watched the kids enjoy this.
Do you know what time they're doing it?
9 a.m. There's going to be there's going to be toys buried in the sand, dinosaurs and dinosaur skeletons, and eggs with dinosaurs, and popsicles are going to be there, and it's It's gonna be fun, it's gonna be a good thing. And you all help do it because you help support Park Pride and make donations and work and help us, so please come.
Here. Item H, special event application for the Boy Scouts First Aid and Food Stand for the MR 340 Canoe Race at the Riverfront Park, August 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Move to approve?
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carried. No further business. Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you everyone for coming.
How's he gonna do that?
Yeah, I was looking at that.
I figured that.
Other schematic that Martin Carrington. Well, it doesn't show on that. You have, okay, it's like this, right? And this is what we measure. The problem is, every one of these arch windows go in that far. I never noticed it either.
About what? Uh-huh.
How wide are those? They're wide. That whole thing will slide right in there.
Did I get it?
Push it in.